Thank you so much, Baba, and thank you all for being here today. Unlike you, I am not a media literacy expert. I've been working, though, in marketing for since before Google started, actually, in sports, in music, and in technology. And right now, I lead brand marketing in Northern Europe, and I'm just a big supporter of today's event. I am also a mom of 3 kids, Gen Z, ages 14 to 20. One of them is a very avid gamer, and one of them is a TikTok creator with 42,000 followers. So I speak to the topic from personal experience. So one of the cool things about working at Google is that when I ask myself, who are these people living in my house, I actually get access to some really interesting insights and trends. And so what I'm hoping is that some of these insights will also be interesting to you today as you think about how to engage with Gen Z in your programs, but also maybe what you can learn from Gen Z on how to engage with content and how they engage with media, especially on the important topic of media literacy. So before I dive into some of the interesting YouTube trends, I'm going to start with some macro trends that came up from research at Google, and just a couple top-line ones. One, and if you know teenagers, you'll get this, they have this absurd sense of humor. And it's this sense of humor that is really shaped around current trends and events. And so when they think about the pandemic, of course, they make a meme. Second thing is that they live in a world that's sort of shaped by what they call intersectionality. They do not conform to rigid identification, rigid identity. They feel that they can be part of multiple groups, and it doesn't undermine who they are at the core. And finally, and this is most important probably for us today, is that they have grown up with this sort of deluge of information. They're really good at filtering that information, but filtering that information, they find it really taxing and often frustrating. So, what does that mean for us? Well, you could say, you know what, we all feel overwhelmed sometimes by all this media, but what's interesting about Gen Z is that their info-seeking is motivated by more than the desire to know what is true. So, Gen Z, as you know, doesn't really watch linear broadcast TV, they don't read newspapers. To a Gen Z teen, the news is what is most relevant to me. And so while you and I might rely on these sort of universal standards to assess whether something is true or not true, Gen Z tend to gradually form their opinions while they are interacting online with all their various communities. And they really rely on social validation and feedback along the way to shape their perceptions. And so then they orient these perceptions with their peer groups, with their families, and probably most importantly, with influencer groups. And influencers online they really look to because they kind of trust that those people have done the work. So with that in mind, I'm going to share just some top-line tips about what is going on in the world of YouTube. And this kind of gives you a little bit of insight into trends and culture. And so you can say we're experiencing this like evolution in entertainment. And yes, it is certainly changing, but it's also subtle, and it's constantly evolving. Now, 2/3 of Gen Z would argue that the content that is most important to them is not what's hot, or not the thing that everybody else cares about. It's more important that it's important and interesting to them. And in fact, many of them say that what's interesting to them isn't interesting to anybody else that they know. So this idea around personalization is super important. Now, we obviously have this proliferation of platforms and technologies, particularly over the last 5 years. And so if you think about it, this is the years in which Gen Z came of age, and they are native to these technologies. So maybe you sat in the Shorts session up there and you learned a lot about how to post on YouTube Shorts, but for them that just comes naturally. I look at my 14-year-old and I'm overwhelmed with how talented she is at creating video. Now here's a really startling fact. How many of you in the room would actually actively post on social media? Quick show of hands. Okay, so this is good. You're very active. The average is 10%. Across all audiences. But if you look at Gen Z, 85% have put video online. That is a crazy huge number. You also, if you sat in that short session, learned about communities. And communities are really, really, if you have one takeaway from today, it's how important these communities are. And they are really influential. Now, who is a community for today's youth? Well, community is somebody who sort of shares this common personal interest. And it has to someone who actually really creates this sort of active dialogue in that digital environment. And so, on YouTube, you have these communities around everything. I mean, it could be around music or dance choreography. It could be about something like really nerdy, like watch collecting, or even like fragrance reviewing. And I think, as Lucas said, it's like, sparking community connects people. So think about connecting to youth means connecting and being meaningful to their communities. And one of the most powerful forms of community that we see is fandom. 65% of Gen Z would describe themselves as a super fan. That's more than half, a super fan. So let's look at K-pop as an example on how that comes to life. So K-pop, fandom and digital participation have been part of K-pop since its, inception. And they're really central to the experience. And fans create these channels on YouTube. And they have posted thousands and thousands of fan cam. If you watch Saturday Night Live this week, they finally had fan cam on SNL. These videos are so popular that the labels behind the K-pop stars are actually releasing them as official content. Fan cam videos have billions of views on YouTube. So if you're a parent like me, you might think that Gen Z is synonymous with this scrolling, with this really snackable content. You think they have really short attention spans. But one interesting thing and a trend that we're seeing on YouTube is this sort of long-form video essay where people have these conversations around things and cultural moments. And some of these things can be over an hour long. There's one case where there was this woman here on top left on your screen, Jenny Nicholson, spends 2.5 hours talking about the Vampire Diaries. 10 million views of a 2.5-hour piece of content. If you spend any time with a teenager, you know the importance of memes. Memes are the building blocks and the social currency of their culture. And, memes, interestingly, span topics. They obviously are important for communities, but they also span continents. So there's an interesting, example here where, this is a video where teenagers in India took a pop song from the Ivory Coast, and they put it on YouTube Shorts, and they incorporated this sort of nostalgic Bollywood feel. And so you've got memes building upon memes, building upon memes, and this layering is really important. So let's talk about Bruno. I think everybody must know the song Bruno. But Bruno, this is one of the biggest surprises of 2022, how popular that the theme track, the soundtrack to Encanto became, and particularly the song, We Don't Talk About Bruno. I mean, it's a song about a middle-aged guy, right, who's hiding in a wall. It doesn't really seem like it would be such a hot topic. But this became one of the top songs on YouTube in over 50 countries. And this bled into every single type of content, whether you're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. This was everywhere, and certainly across YouTube. So just like YouTube, some of the biggest trends involve this single entry, or this single moment, or a single phenomenon, but there's multiple points of entry across platforms. So the release of the Eden Ring game generated a huge spike in activity on YouTube. Fans watched these live streams, and they hung out with their favorite creators. They went to Shorts to watch unboxings or the comedy stretches, and then long-form video content to watch tutorials, speedruns, animated films, or explainers. And in 60 days, you had something like 3 billion views of content. So I'm running out of time, so let's just talk a minute about what else happens on YouTube. So, Gen Z came of age during the pandemic. 70% of Gen Zers say that anxiety and depression are significant problems. So what do we see on YouTube? A really interesting area is this content that's soothing content. It lets people kind of zone out, chill out, these patterns inside fruit, or watching scrapbooking journals. You have these vibe content. Portuguese artist Bad Bunny, when he released his album, It was accompanied by a series of these 360-degree videos that let the viewer just kind of escape with him. They have over 690 million combined views. 90% of Gen Z watched a video to transport them to a different place. At the same time, you've got this ASMR content that continues to evolve, and it's not just like hearing the sound of a sneaker, but here, the Victoria and Albert Museum actually has just ASMR content of preserving historic artifacts. Very chill, very calming. And at the same time, we've seen this interest in horror content, and that has risen dramatically. And you sort of think, well, how does that happen? But this is like not the millennial horror, which is like jump scare. This is more like analog horror, where they build it around found footage aesthetic. And how is that you can have horror together with this soothing content? Well, the truth is that what happens is that horror content often serves as a kind of like salve for when you have a lot of anxiety or panic. So, just to wrap up, I think, if we think about Gen Z and how they navigate online information, it's really important to remember that they are seeking social belonging just as much as they are seeking truth. They interpret information together as part of their communities. They crowdsource their thinking. And, this could be, the thing, keep in mind that the comments on a post are just as important as the post itself. And that creates the social discourse that allows them to connect with their peer groups and helps to define their own identity. So I know I'm over time, so I'll wrap right there, but I want to, I was going to say, I hope that this helps you, whether you're a parent like me, or whether that helps you kind of get inside the minds a little bit of Gen Z and where the trends are and what's happening in their worlds as we think about how to reach them to be critical consumers of media online. Thank you very much.